Today we're going to show you how to install the Barricade HD tire carrier that we bought from Extreme Terrain. We're putting this on the Jeep, 2013 Jeep, to prevent the oversized tire weight from causing a lot of rattle and vibrating and shaking on the tailgate. The kit that we're going to install is a Barricade HD tire carrier, part number J106891, that we purchased from Extreme Terrain. We're going to begin by removing the existing spare tire. The nice thing about the kit we bought is it's going to allow us to reuse this piece rather than discarding it at the end of the job. So now we're going to remove this piece from the tailgate. First thing we're going to do is remove this vent so that we can disconnect the third brake light connector. Next thing we're going to do is remove 8 13mm bolts. Now that we remove the support, we're going to remove this vent and wipe it down. Next, we're going to remove these plastic covers on the upper and lower hinge. We picked up some frog tape for this part of the job. We're going to put 4 pieces of tape on the tailgate, overlapping the rear quarter panel. And this is going to help us mark some lines and line up the tailgate when it goes back on. Now that we have the tape on, we're going to mark up some lines on here so that we know exactly how to line up the tailgate when we reinstall it. Now we're going to just slice the tape right on the seam. Next step, the instructions call for shims on the bottom of the tailgate prior to releasing the hinge itself. We don't have shims that big. It's really just to prevent it from sagging as you loosen up the bolts. We're going to use some rags instead. Next, we're going to remove the hinges using a 13mm socket for these bolts and T50 Torx bit for 3 in there. Before you can access the 3 Torx bolts, you're going to want to open the hinge so you can extract the Torx bolts. So now we're going to install both of the hinge supports on the outside. You're going to use the original factory T50 Torx bolts for these. The bolts are tapered on the bolt head as well as on the bracket, so these are self-centering. So when you put them in, you're going to alternate and tighten them all down snug. Next we're going to install the main support. This may fit snug into the hinge, so we're going to use a rubber mallet to help guide it. Now that we have the main bracket lined up, we're going to install the hinge pins. You'll notice there's a ribbed edge. This is going to keep the bolt from backing out on its own in the event you lose the pin clip on the other side. We're going to put a piece of cardboard up here so we don't damage the top of the head and scratch it. On the bottom side, you're going to notice there's a groove in there, and you're going to put this C-clip in. If you can't push it in by hand, just use a pair of pliers until it snaps in. If you recall in the previous step, we removed this vent. This is going to remain out of the vehicle. This new piece is going to fasten on the back side here. Next step, we're going to install the spacers on the back side. You'll notice there's two different thicknesses. There's two different gap depths on each side of this, on the top and the bottom. So the thicker one's going to go on the bottom like this. The smaller one is going to go on the top like this. And I'll give you a little tip to help get these in here. You're going to use the original 13mm bolts that you removed from the old hinges. Set them in there like this. Hold them in place. Now as you close the hinge, you don't have to worry about fighting them to keep them in spot. So this is where our hash marks are going to come into play on that we put on tape earlier. As you're tightening these down and getting the bolts started, you're going to want to make sure that the marks are lined up, and you'll be able to screw these right in with no problem at all. And as you tighten them down, you're going to want to make sure that these hash marks stay lined up at all times. Hash marks look good, so we're going to tighten these down. Now we're going to install the original factory mount on top of the new bracket using the 8 13mm bolts. Now we're going to run the harness back in where we took it out and set the grommet in place. Now we're going to remove the spacer rags, clean up our tape. So now we're going to check the hinge movement and make sure we installed it properly. Once we check the hinge movement and that looks good, we're going to wire up the harness again for the third brake light and reinstall the cover. Now we're going to remount the spare tire.